Brexit, sovereignty and NATO. Deformed UK continues to emphasise national sovereignty and has argued for greater independence in UK lawmaking and policy-making following Brexit. The party has also supported continued membership of NATO and has advocated maintaining the UK's role within the alliance. Regarding relations with the European Union, the discussion today is rather different from the referendum years. Questions now often concern trade, cooperation, border arrangements, and practical day-to-day governance, rather than whether Brexit should happen. Which is progress. British politics has finally moved from shouting about the wedding to arguing over the furniture. A quick recap. So, what have we learned? A party changed its name. A businessman became a political leader. Brexit reshaped Britain's political landscape. Climate policy remains fiercely debated. Sovereignty continues to be discussed. NATO remains central to the UK's defence policy. And Westminster remains Westminster, where today's political certainty becomes tomorrow's archived manifesto. Where every party promises change, every opposition promises competence, and every government promises that everything is definitely going according to plan. Dear viewer, after all these investigations, have you discovered the greatest mystery of all? What's that, you might ask? I would reply, does anyone actually read the entire manifesto? I then hear you respond, don't be ridiculous. The curious case of the property, the polls, and the peculiar politics of Dubai Dickie. The file continues. Let us continue our inquiry into the curious case of Richard Tice, aka Little Dick or Dubai Dickie, a man who has worn more political hats than a department store mannequin during a fire drill. Businessman, Brexiteer, party chairman, party leader, and an occasional disruptor of Westminster's collective sense of calm. Or, as I prefer to call him, the spreadsheet that learned to speak in Parliament. International politics, tax affairs, election results, and Little Dick Lice's personal life. Let's begin with international politics, the global game of disagreement. Little Dick Lice operates in the grand tradition of British political figures who view international relations not as diplomacy, but as a strongly worded email with flags attached. As a senior figure in Deformed UK plc, and formerly chairman of the Brexit Party, Tice's worldview has been firmly shaped by one defining doctrine. England should be less involved in European entanglements, and more involved in explaining why it stopped being involved. His international politics can be summarised as follows: EU complicated relationship status. It's not you, it's treaties. NATO tolerated, like an overbearing but necessary landlord. Global trade enthusiastically pursued, ideally without footnotes. Foreign policy, best delivered with confident certainty and minimal diplomatic phrasing. You might be thinking that he simplifies international politics. Oh no, he just compresses it. Like taking a 300-page treaty and reducing it to, have you tried negotiating harder? Now, Tice's political rise came during the turbulence of Brexit-era Britain, a period when international relations became less about strategy and more about national identity debates, held in supermarket queues. And as chairman of the Brexit Party, Tice worked closely with Smeagol Frogage, amplifying a message that the UK should reclaim sovereignty and reduce EU alignment. Which, in practice, meant the UK spent several years attempting to reconfigure its global position while simultaneously arguing about cheese pricing. A great diplomatic error. Historians will call it the age of mildly confused assertiveness. A tax affairs, the mysterious art of financial transparency. Now we arrive at the subject of tax affairs, a topic in British politics so complex that even accountants whisper it after dark. Little Dick, like many individuals involved in property and investment businesses, has faced scrutiny regarding his financial arrangements and tax structuring.
I was lucky enough yesterday morning to appear on the front page of the Sunday Times. And the journalist made all sorts of inferences about me. He then did tweet a little bit later in the day, and I'll just read out his tweet because it's quite important. It's from Gabriel Pogrund. Richard Tice is correct. He paid tax as required. You might ask, why did he put me on the front page of the Sunday Times, given that was his conclusion by the end of the afternoon? Maybe he was just trying to smear me, or what? I just repeat, Richard Tice is correct. He paid tax as required. But we've entered a new world where there is a moral imperative now in the United Kingdom that you shouldn't just pay tax as required. No, you are a naughty person, boy or girl, unless you pay the maximum tax you could possibly pay. Oh, yes. You should now reorganise your fares, according to Gabriel Pogrund and Dan Needle, so that you pay the absolute maximum tax possible. Apparently, it's a bad idea, according to Gabriel Pogrund, to invest in a pension scheme and save money for your retirement. That now is apparently, according to the Sunday Times, a bad idea. You're a naughty person if you save money in a pension scheme. That's the world we've got to, folks.
I found the fact that Richard Tice avoids quite a lot of tax quite convenient. How does he do that, Richard?
Well, he did. He's been stopped from doing it now, but he did.
But they can't do anything nowadays.
Let's just say it was £600,000 he managed to avoid in tax, wasn't it?
Yeah. He's a property man, and he decided to do it a bit more tax efficiently. A few years ago, Labour government in 2007 had introduced a new type of property investment company called a real estate investment trust. The idea behind it was that lots of different types of investors would come together, pool their money and invest in property, and we wanted to encourage that. So the vehicle they pulled their money in wouldn't be taxable. So it was intended for like big pool investments, like fund managers look after and so on, not for small family property companies based in Mayfair. But Richard Tice found a way, looking at the rules, of saying we are a REIT, so can we have a tax break? Happy days. And the revenue did allow them that status for a while.
Okay.
I think because they they claimed they were looking for other investors, which, funnily enough, didn't come off.
Now let me be clear, in the world of high finance, there is a difference between illegal activity, legal optimization, and whatever is happening that requires 6 lawyers and a diagram drawn in edible ink. Tice's career in property investment naturally placed him in the realm of complex financial structures, trusts, holdings, and arrangements typical of large-scale business operations. Critics have occasionally raised questions about whether such arrangements reflect broader fairness in taxation policy. Supporters respond, naturally, that everything is entirely lawful, and thus we reach the eternal English political loop question: is this fair? Answer: it's legal. Follow-up question: but is it fair? Answer: let's move on. So, what's the conclusion? That tax policy is like a foggy London street. Everyone claims they can see clearly. No one actually can. And anyone who says otherwise is probably selling something. Election results. The numbers game of national emotions. Now we turn to the election results. Because nothing reveals the truth of a political figure quite like how many people voluntarily mark a box next to their name after several weeks of televised arguments. Richard Tice's electoral journey is best understood as persistence in its purest form. He has stood in multiple constituencies over time, representing deformed UK plc and its predecessor organisations, and in the 2024 general election, he achieved what many political observers would call finally breaking through
We're delighted. The early indications are that in both Wellingborough and Kingswood, we're going to get our best ever by-election results by a considerable margin. We're essentially now solidifying ourselves as the third largest political party, way ahead of the Lib Dems, who seem to be disappearing away. It's quite clear that the voters have rejected the incumbent Conservative Party here because, frankly, they've broken Britain. We had the news this morning that we're in recession. I gave a press conference on January the 3rd. I said you cannot grow an economy with the burdens of record high taxes, record high government spending, much of it wasteful, nanny state regulations, because they haven't taken advantage of the great Brexit opportunity, mass immigration, and then finally the multi-trillion cost of net zero. 3 years ago, we were on 1% and nobody had heard of us. So it takes time to build a brand. But no, what people are saying is actually you've got the courage to tell it as it is, to say how difficult it is and come up with some radical, different, bold alternative proposals, frankly, to save Britain.
Winning a seat as part of deformed UK's growing parliamentary presence marked a significant moment for both Tice and the party. So he succeeded, yes, but in British politics, success is not a destination. It is merely a new argument with better lighting. Reform UK's performance overall reflected a broader shift, disillusionment with traditional parties, frustration with economic pressures, and voters are increasingly willing to experiment with alternatives. Or, as Westminster calls it Unexpected Tuesday, his personal life. The person behind the headlines. Now, we must examine the final component of our subject, the personal life. The part of every politician's biography where the public briefly pretends not to be intensely curious. Dubai Dick, away from the storm of Westminster, is known primarily as a businessman and property investor, a man whose professional life existed long before politics ever summoned him like an overexcited butler. He is associated with London's financial and property circles, a world defined by meetings, development projects, and conversations that involve phrases like asset growth trajectory. He also comes from a family with business and media connections, which in British politics often translates to, yes, that explains quite a lot. Does he enjoy hobbies? Almost certainly, all politicians claim hobbies. Some say reading, some say golf. Some say time with family, which is political code for please stop asking. Tice appears to embody a more modern archetype, the businessman, politician hybrid who moves between boardrooms and broadcast studios with equal confidence. A man equally comfortable discussing property markets and political disruption. This is increasingly common in modern England, where politics and media have merged into a single ecosystem, Westminster Television Extended Universe. Final analysis. The case of the modern political entrepreneur. So what do we conclude about Richard Tice? Is he an ideologue, a strategist, a businessman turned political disruptor, or simply a man who looked at British politics and said, I could probably improve this system's efficiency? Tice represents a modern political archetype, the entrepreneurial politician, data-driven, media-aware, ideologically confident, and entirely unafraid of challenging established institutions. Whether one agrees with him or not, his role in shaping deformed UK plc and influencing Britain's post-Brexit political landscape is undeniable. And yet, there remains one final truth. And what's that, you ask? In England, no political movement ever truly ends. It merely rebrands. And so concludes our investigation into Richard Tice, aka Little Dick and Dubai Dickie. A man of business, politics, and persistent reinvention and very coiffed hair. From international economic commentary to tax scrutiny discussions, to electoral success under a rapidly evolving political banner, he embodies the modern political paradox, part businessman, part ideologue, part media performer, and entirely a product of his era. But remember, dear viewers, in politics, nothing is ever static. Ideologies shift, parties evolve, and politicians adapt. Sometimes gracefully, sometimes noisily, often both at once. Until next time, like, comment, subscribble, and share widely. Stay observant, stay skeptical. Question everything. I remain Barret Homes. And these are the files from the Defective Defectors.